If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is a weird/creepy thing that has happened to you that you know will never be explained? I was working as a graveyard shift security guard on a free into Saturday morning at a UPS center, a major truck collection/distribution center in Redmond, near Seattle. I was on duty at the personnel entrance all night. One other guard had been on duty at the truck entrance, but he got to leave at 4 a.m. when the trucks, 18-wheelers, stopped arriving. I was bit cold, so I sat in the chair Indian style for several hours. Bad idea. To add further stupidity to the situation, I was wearing a thick belt and had a Glock 17 in a pancake holster that rides on the hip. This was totally unauthorized, but I had just bought it and thought it would be cool to carry. I was 21. When 8 a.m. rolled around, everyone was out. It was time to make the rounds, checking all the gates and doors. When I finally stood up, I could tell that my sitting position had been a bad choice, as all the blood started rushing south and I was feeling quite dizzy. I decided I should just leave and hope that everything was locked. It was incredibly rare to find an unlocked door or gate anyway. I paced around for a few minutes, then decided that I was feeling well enough to drive home. I walked to my car, opened the door, and then... next thing I know, I'm on a dirt road with 7-foot-tall hedges/sticker bushes on both sides. I have no idea where I am. I listen for a minute and go in the direction where I think I hear cars. I walk about 5 minutes before reaching a group of houses. Finally, I find a street and know which way I need to go. It takes me another 15 minutes to walk back, as I didn't want to cross through the cattle farm that separated me from the UPS center. As I approach the parking lot, I see my car, the only one in the lot, with the driver's door open. As I get closer, I can hear the bing, bong going off as the key is in the ignition and the door is wide open. When I start it up, it's a bit after 9 a.m. I had been gone for almost an hour. I have no idea how I wound up on that dirt road. No doubt there is a mundane answer for how I got there and why there. But I'll never know. That was in 1991, when I in college. P.S. I still had a full clip, so luckily I never fired the gun during my lost time. Imagine if I woke up with a half a clip. I was driving from Springfield, Missouri to Columbia to see to a concert, and on the way there, about halfway through the drive, a black car got behind me and started flashing its lights at me. It was the alternating left/right flash like a cop car, not just someone flashing lights. I was doing about 5 over, so figured I was getting popped for speeding, so as soon as I could I pulled over. Sitting there on the side of the road, I put my hands on the steering wheel, waiting for a cop or something. I couldn't see any other lights on the car, so was thinking maybe it was an undercover/unmarked car or something. After about 5 minutes of sitting there with nothing happening, the car behind me pulled out and left. Was some really weird shit. A couple years ago, I was like 23 at the time, my girlfriend and I went camping out west. This in an area where there is pretty much nothing but dirt and small trees, and civilization is about 2 hours away. We decided to camp up close to a small mountain/large hill that had a big dent in the side where some mining was done a bunch of years ago. We camped on the top of a large tailings pile from the mine, which formed a small plateau at the top. Essentially, there was a small cliff at the perimeter for the most part, and the steep incline of the mountain/hill for the rest. This is essential to the story. Now for the creepy part. We had passed out in our tent, which was right at the edge of the cliffside, after drinking a lot of watermelon pucker and peach schnapps. I woke up in the middle of the night to very strange noises which seemed to surround the tent. Very loud spitting/gurgling/chortle noises seemed to come from all directions. How the fuck? There is a cliff to my back and a steep mountain in front. Petrified from fear, I laid in my sleeping bag trying to figure out WTF could be making this unearthly sound. After what seemed like forever, I mustered the courage to wake up my still intoxicated GF and instantly demanded that she be quiet and to fucking listen. I needed to make sure that I wasn't the only one that could hear it and that I wasn't dreaming or some shit. I could immediately see the panic in her face. With fear in her voice, she quietly asked what the hell it was. Trying to act tough and ease her panic, I decided to lie to her and say it was coyotes or something. After that, she laid back down and eventually fell asleep. I laid in my sleeping bag wide-eyed, still scared shitless, just listening and waiting to be eaten by monsters or aliens or whatever my imagination could come up with. Eventually, after what seemed like hours, I fell asleep. In the morning, there were no footprints/tracks of any kind other than our own, outside the tent. I confessed to her then that I really had no idea what the hell the sound was and laid awake most of the night silently panicking. We GTFO. Every time I tell this story, I get chills and feel like I'm going to cry or something. It was so scary. This time is no different. Uck. I would sleep over my uncle's house a lot as a kid. He had a nice open backyard I would always traverse throughout the day. Most of the bedroom windows, 3 out of 4, faced the backyard and you could pretty much see everything, including large rolling hills about 200 meters away in the background. One night I am sleeping there in one of the bedrooms, but I am suddenly awakened by this bright light. I am groggy and half asleep and I think that maybe someone was flashing a flashlight on me. But then I realized this bright, silvery iridescent glow was coming from outside my open window. I squint and look out into the silhouette of the hillsides in the distance, and I see this naked humanoid figure standing upright holding this bright ball of light into the sky beaming into the troposphere. I completely freak out and I scream. The moment I scream, the ball of light just disappears, but the humanoid figure still stands there without any reaction as if it was still holding it. Keep in mind this is 200 meters away, so I ponder that maybe it's just shadows or a statue or something, and somehow that light was perhaps just something from the streets. I'm still about to shit my pants, so instead of finding diapers I close the blinds and window and lie back in my bed in fresh cold sweat just trying to sleep. About 25 minutes pass and I begin dozing off again at this point, before I hear something fall in the backyard. I get really tense again and I don't even breathe, as I'm trying to hear anything. Elongated seconds of silence passes before I hear knocking on one of the bedroom windows, as if someone was trying to knock on it to get the person's attention. I stay frozen in my bed, unable to move, just listening to more silence before a minute or so passes and then the next bedroom window gets knocked on. The first window no one was in, but the next one I was sure my cousin was there sleeping. And I am scared that my window was next, so I go to my cousin's bedroom and walk in to see if she heard the knock. I open the door and I see her sitting on the bed with her eyes wide out almost as if she was in a trance. I whisper her name out and she looks at me. I was scared too, but I remember her muttering something about a robber to me. We both leave the room to go to my uncle's room, and as we step out into the hallway, we both see that bright silvery light beaming into my room under the slit of the door. We both freak out and run to my uncle's room to try and explain what just happened. He's half asleep and thinks we're fooling around, understandable considering our reputation, so he gets pissed and tells us to leave the room. Me and my cousin go out of the room for a bit, look back at my room and see the light gone, and just wait around in the kitchen to think over what just happened. I peek outside from the kitchen window towards the hills and see nothing there either. To this day I am convinced that had I not left the room I would have been anally probed. I used to work in a company that makes plastic medical supplies, and within my first week there, I was left alone to handle machinery that took up a whole room. On either side of the room were smaller, hallway-like, rooms that held all the valves, switches and pipes that powered the machinery in the main room. Both rooms had 2 doors on either side, meaning there were 4 doors in the room besides the door into the main room. It wasn't easy getting through these smaller rooms, having to duck under and step over pipes and squeezing between the wall and shelves that held power boxes. Well, soon after I started working at this place, I'd be working away, doing my job, when at random times I'd see a person peeking out of one of the doors leading to one of the smaller rooms out of the corner of my eye. As soon as I looked in that direction, the person would dart back into the room. I'd say hello. And no one would answer. I'd walk over and look in the room and see nothing there. A couple hours later, I'd be on the other side of the room and see this same person peeking out from one of the doors to the other room on the other side of the main room. I look over, nothing there. Walk over and look in the small room, nothing there. It wasn't like some shadowy figure either, I'd clearly see this person. They were Hispanic, short hair, with a one-piece, blue, suit. I'm not saying I think that place was haunted, but I don't know where that guy was hiding. I was at my brother's house with my then 2-year-old daughter. We were there alone, it was night, maybe about 7, in the fall or winter. I was just there to do laundry. The laundry room was downstairs in the den. The stairs were not particularly steep, maybe 5 steps, a landing, then another 5 steps around the corner. My daughter kept trying to climb the steps and I kept pulling her back. At one point, after transferring clothes from washer to dryer, I go back to the family room in the den, where I had left my daughter. She wasn't there. I figure she must have snuck behind me and up the stairs, so I head up to look for her. Upstairs is dark except for the kitchen. Can't find her, not in the living room, not in the dining room, not in the bedroom. I go back downstairs, still can't find her. I rush back upstairs, starting to freak out. I'm standing in the living room facing the hallway that runs perpendicular, his bedroom on one end to my left and the other end emptying into the kitchen. I suddenly see movement coming from his bedroom. A shadow comes drifting out, starting small then rising up to the ceiling as it moved toward the kitchen. Thing was, though, this shadow was opaque, almost more like a velvety black. I lose my senses for a moment and run back downstairs, then freak out more that I'm sure my daughter's up there and I've just left her there. I run back up, and as I'm looking straight into the living room, she emerges from the opposite corner, almost materializing from the shadows. She's holding an unwrapped candy cane and laughing. I could not recreate the effect of the shadow, though I messed with the light source a lot. I also don't know where the candy cane came from. It was not close to Christmas, and there were no decorations up or left out. I've carried this around for better than 3 decades. Rural Nova Scotia, late 70s. I was maybe 10 years old. I was pretty much a loner, by choice even to this day, though I now married and have kidlets. Anyhow, I was exploring around this lazy winding creek one summer day. We used to swim and catch small rainbow trout in there once in a while. I was looking over the grassy bank into the water, which was maybe 4 or 5 feet deep. The water is tinted a tannic color, as are many freshwater ways in the Maritimes. Kind of a light tea coloring. I was looking for fish or whatever. Then I saw it. Crawling across the bottom of the sandy bottom, what looked like to me at the time, a massive salamander. Longer than 3 feet from nose to tail. My mind couldn't really process what I was seeing because it made no sense. Of course, those types of animals didn't exist natively there, let alone in that size, and it was pretty undeveloped region in the 1970s, so as far as it being someone's pet iguana, I don't even know if I knew what an iguana was back then. Being released, I couldn't grasp how this big fucker was right before my eyes, seemingly not requiring to breathe air. The whole encounter lasted only 5 or 10 seconds, but even now I remember it vividly as the moment it happened. I've never really shared the story, nor have I ever sought out what in the hell that thing was. I was about 10 or 11. It was a late Sunday afternoon, and I was playing at my elementary school. I was completely alone, which suited me fine, except that it was just weird being at school all alone, since usually when I was there were tons of other people. Anyway, it's dusk, pretty close to dark. I'm about to leave, since I have to be home by dark, when I get this very weird feeling that somebody is watching me. I look over towards the school. I'm about 50 feet away at the time, and see what looks like a naked man standing in the window looking out at me. When I turn to look, he immediately backs away from the window. I, of course, am freaked out, but I figure there has to be a logical explanation, so I head over towards the school and right up to the window. I'm looking all over inside the room, but I can't find anything suspicious at all. Then, I happen to look up a little bit and notice that the pull string on the blinds for the window, I thought I saw him, it was swaying back and forth. None of the other pull strings for the other windows were moving like this. Needless to say, I GTFO. I remember walking on railroad tracks with my brother and some friends as we scouted the woods behind our neighborhood. It was many, many years ago, but I still recall it. Problem is, there are no tracks in those woods. No maps or aerial shots show them, and the woods have been cut down for more housing. I asked my brother about it one day and he recalled it too. We're both baffled. Also, same woods, different time. 4 of us were walking through for a long time and came upon a huge opening. When we broke through the trees, we noticed a large, circular patch with no trees and dead grass and weeds. From my memory, it seemed like it was 100 yards across. We were pretty amazed and stayed there for a while looking at it. We concluded a UFO landed there. Must have been. At least, that's what our young minds thought. Those woods were magical to us kids at the time. There were so many weird things we encountered there, and to this day we talk about them. Though this is probably explainable, it's insanely creepy, and we never quite figured out what, or who, it was exactly. When I was 10 or 11 years old, one of my friends had a birthday party / sleepover at his house. Our whole class was there during the day, and about 6 or 7 of us were invited to spend the night. His house was only 1 story, but it was pretty big. They had a very large backyard with a pool and outdoor dog pen. It was his birthday and we were young, so we decided to be badasses and pull an all-nighter. His bedroom was directly across from the outdoor dog pen. On the roof above his room were lights that illuminated the dog pen at night. His TV was situated in front of the window that looked out over the dog pen, and we were playing a variety of PS1 games. I'd say it was around midnight at this time. We were laughing and joking and having a good time, and then suddenly we noticed a shadow walk past the window outside. It was clearly a person's shadow, but the way in which the shadow moved made us all immediately shut up and look at each other nervously. It walked briskly and deliberately past his window and into his backyard, as if the person already knew where he or she was going. Anyone out there would have easily been able to hear us laughing and yelling inside. His mom was asleep in her room down the hall and his dad was out of town, so whoever it was did not belong there. Initially we were all legitimately scared. We had gone from being goofy, laughing and poking fun at each other to dead quiet, frightened and confused. We discussed what it could be and what we should do for about 10 to 15 minutes, afraid to leave my friend's room. We kind of calmed down while discussing it, thinking we were overreacting. The fun-filled mood began to return, and we decided to go outside and find out what it was for ourselves, looking at it as sort of an adventure. The very end of his backyard had a fence that separated it from a sewer. On the other side of that was another house's backyard. We huddled together and began searching his backyard, not seeing anything and becoming more and more relaxed as we searched. Except for the dog pen, the backyard was completely dark and we didn't have a flashlight. When we finished searching at the very end corner of his backyard that was kind of obscured by a very large tree, we turned around to head back in, laughing it off. As soon as we got close to the pool and the back door, we heard the chain fence rattle as if someone was climbing over it. We stopped and ran back to where we just were and heard the chain fence on the other side of the sewer rattle as well while we were running. When we got there, the fence in the corner of his backyard had been bent significantly at the top as if someone very, very heavy had climbed over it. We couldn't really see the fence on the other side, as it was far too dark, but we proceeded to collectively shit our pants and run back inside. We pulled an all-nighter and nothing strange ever happened at his house again, but as a kid, that shit freaked me out, and remembering the shadow walking past his bedroom window, just the way it moved, still freaks me out to this day. I was heading back to my hotel after a night drinking when I was in Ireland. Me and the group get on our bus, since the hotel was a few miles out of town, and we're all having a good time just singing songs and laughing. I'm sitting in the very back so I can look down the center of the bus and see straight out the windshield. I'm listening to everyone, buzzing a bit, and then we take this sharp turn. Right in the headlights in the middle of the road is this old hag with the whitest hair I have ever seen. Her face was contorted in a scream and her eyes were wide and it seemed as though she was staring straight at me. I just shout and close my eyes. When I opened them, the bus is still driving and everyone was looking at me all weird. I frantically asked them if they had seen the old woman in the road and none of them said they had. I am freaking out but I try to play it cool. I get all paranoid and don't want to look outside the windows when we pull up to the hotel. We get out and before I leave I asked the bus driver if he saw an old woman screaming in the road and he said no. When I asked him, his smile faded and he looked extremely solemn, somewhat worried even. I still think to this day that I saw a banshee. Maybe I just had an overly powerful imagination, but when I was about 10 years old, I could fly. No, I'm not fucking batshit crazy. I fucking flew. I jumped up, and slowly sank, and kicked the air below me to jump higher. It was a really weird feeling and it took some getting used to, but on good days, I could get really high. The higher I went, the easier it was. The thing is, I remember, clear as day, what the tops of all the houses in the neighborhood look like. I know there's a really large nest in a really large tree and some other details that I would not be able to determine unless I was really high up. Now I'm 21, and I climbed that fucking tree. I got to the highest point I could, and everything I was looking down on looked familiar. It gave me goosebumps. I know I had been there before. I wouldn't say I was physically flying, but it was definitely an out-of-body experience. This shit was happening. Maybe I was sitting on the grass in a trance, but I was fucking flying. The most surreal shit that has ever happened to me. I still have dreams about it, and these dreams are amazing. This didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine. I know that might make this story sound trite and unbelievable. All I can tell you is that she is a very balanced and intelligent person. We stumbled upon this topic when she said that she can't watch movies with things like the occulted because it scares her too much. I told her that it doesn't really bother me since I'm not a believer in witchcraft. After I said this, she pauses and finally says, I am. I've experienced some pretty fucked up shit. Growing up, her parents were extremely conservative Christian and homeschooled her. As a teenager, she began to rebel against her parents' beliefs and became Wiccan. It wasn't Wiccan in the true sense of the word, but rather the kind of Wiccan that an angry teenager looks to for silly little spells in order to try and regain some semblance of control in her overly structured life. She and her friend would slip into the woods. They lived in an extremely rural area, at night, and do things such as bloodletting rituals, voodoo dolls, etc. It was all pretty benign. But then weird things started happening. She and her friend started having similar nightmares. This went on for a couple of weeks, with the nightmares becoming more and more gruesome, until one night my friend dreamed of a man standing outside her window. When she woke up, she found that there was indeed a man standing outside of her window watching her as she slept. She ran terrified from the room and went to get her parents, but by the time they got there he was gone. She and my friend immediately abandoned their Wiccan rituals. The dreams eventually go away and the man never reappears. Here is where it gets fucked up. A couple years after this happens, my friend overhears her aunt talking to her mother about that house she found in the woods. After some prodding, my friend's aunt reluctantly tells her this story. One day, while she was taking a walk in the woods, she found an old, dilapidated house that she had never seen before. The house was clearly abandoned, and out of curiosity she went in and finds a horrifying scene. The walls are covered in dried blood and there is an overwhelming smell of rot. Along with the decaying blood, there is something else on the wall, personal family photos of my friend and her family, exactly like the one she has in her house, framed and hanging on the walls. The aunt fled the house and got my friend's father, but they could never find the house again. This all happened in the same time span that my friend was fucking around with a cult, but her parents never told her about because they didn't want her to be scared. My friend has no idea why all those things happened in those couple of weeks, but she will never touch anything even remotely Wiccan to this day. This still bugs me. I moved into a suburb of Chicago around 3rd grade and became friends with the neighborhood kids. One of the legends they liked to tell was on 2 separate occasions they found discarded axes with the word Doomsday carved into the handle. Whatever, I wrote it off as the work of an overactive imagination and moved on. Fast forward to my time in the neighborhood. We used to hang out inside this large pine tree/bush combination. What I mean by that is that the branches stuck out far enough from its trunk that you could work your way inside of it and be encircled by the tree with a decent-sized clearing to sit. It was a pretty sweet hangout. There was always this rope tied from the trunk of the tree that disappeared into the ground. For years we didn't question it. One day we decided to dig the rope up and check out what was on the other end. Well, at the other end of it was a garbage bag, full of something that smelled foul. Our best guess was animal feces, but mixed in with everything was a small axe that had obviously been there for a while. There were some carvings in the handle of it, but nothing legible. No idea. When I was young we had a very old TV that when you shut it off the bulb would make a loud and distinct pop. I had a dream once that I was walking to the bath down the hall and I peered into the family room where the TV was and there was an old man sitting in the rocking chair watching TV. I had to wake up and pee a lot as a kid, and after that dream, a lot of the time I would open door to go to the bathroom, I could hear the bulb pop and my TV shut off. My basement was pitch black at night, like cannot see your hand in front of your face. Every time I would open the door there would be a quick fading light like the TV did when it shut off and then the pop. I know it was in my head, but sometimes the fading light would briefly show me obstructions in the hallway that weren't always there, vacuums, toys, and I would know not to walk into them. Never could explain it. I stopped being scared of it after a couple of years. In college myself, my roommate and my 2 friends across the hall went down to the dining hall to grab dinner. Our door was self-locking so we pulled it shut and headed down on our way to the first floor where the dining hall for the green was located. We eat our food and come back upstairs and attempt to open the door. I try to push it open but it won't open past the end of the frame and I have no idea why. I ask my roommate to help and we push door open to see that our mini fridge that was right next to the door, about 3 inches away originally, had slid over somehow to block the door. We had no idea how it was possible because we lived on the 3rd floor with no way into our room. The screens and the windows were duct taped in, shitty dorm rooms, so no one could have snuck in and out quickly, and the mini fridge was positioned in such a way that it wouldn't be possible to close the door how it was. None of us have any idea still how it happened. My family grew up in a nice little neighborhood down near a river, an elementary school, and a gravel pit. Consequently, I know almost everyone in that neighborhood and made a lot of friends there growing up. My favorite place to take my lab, who is still kicking it at 13, for walks was the gravel pit. One day when I was about 18 I asked my friend who lived down the road if she wanted to come for a walk to the gravel pit with us. She said no and I went on my merry way. So I've been in the gravel wandering around for a while. I had probably smoked a joint and I was having a good old time with my dog. The gravel pit by my house has about 4 different pits and has varying levels of height on the 2nd level. It is almost impossible to see from one side to the other because of this and a few mountains of trees and gravel in random places. Also, all around the perimeter is forest, and in some parts you can get to trails that will take you to the school or down to the river. It's all pretty connected. Anyway, I'm walking and hear my friend calling my name. I stop, look around, and wait for her to catch up. It was weird because she sounded like she was coming from the other side of an embankment into the forest where I knew there were no trails. After a couple minutes I yelled, "Hurry up!" and kept on walking. I didn't hear anything from her for a bit, so I assumed I was hearing things or she turned around. About 10 minutes later I walked down a road to the bottom layer of the gravel pit. I really wish I could properly describe my gravel pit. Just keep in mind, While I'm walking, I've got bush and high walls of gravel separating me from the forest and stuff. As I start walking, I hear someone possibly calling my name. I can't really remember what exactly they yelled to get my attention. I look where the noise is from, and up and about 200 meters ahead of me on the top of a very high embankment is a fucking person. All I could see was the head because the trees were pretty thick and they were really far away. They stepped out and I could see the body a tiny bit, and I could see that it was most likely a guy, and he was pretty tall compared to the trees. My first thought was it was my dad because I asked him to come that day, too. I also knew I wasn't crazy at this point, because my dog had noticed the movement and started barking and running towards the cliff, although he would have never caught them in time. So I yelled out, "Who is that?" I mean, obviously this person knew me, they had been yelling my name. Farticus. Yeah, for real, that's what I thought I heard, although I highly doubt that's what they said. So at this point I'm sure it's my dad because he's retarded enough to yell something stupid like that. So I yell back, "What are you doing here?" Then whoever the hell it was stepped backwards and melted into the trees. All of a sudden I was like, holy f, and started walking as fast as I could back home. I realized that was totally not normal shit someone would do. In order to have gotten to where they were, they had to have been walking beside me the entire time, stalking me through the bush, and then somehow managed to get through the bushes to the top of a cliff which was as far away from me as possible. Why the fuck would anyone I knew do that? Of course, as I got closer to home I thought maybe one of the neighborhood kids or my friends thought it would be funny to do that, but still. I honestly don't even know how they got to where they were when they were first yelling my name without me noticing because of the way the pit is shaped. They would have to be running very fast through the bush. So I get home, first person I call is my dad. He's at home and says he wasn't there. I hang up before I tell him why I asked. I start calling all the people I knew in the neighborhood. No way they'd get home before me. They were all there or accounted for. I realized this was no person I really even was friends with. I actually considered for a while that I had seen a ghost or a vision, and on my way back home I thought maybe my dad had died or something. It's weird, but my brain was working in overtime to try and make sense of what the hell just happened. I do have suspicions about an autistic boy down my street. He's a few years younger than me and had a huge crush on me, and I knew he hung out around there sometimes. It still bothers me that I will never, ever find out who the hell that was. The way the floating white head appeared out of nowhere on the top of that cliff, and then the way it melted and disappeared back in the trees still creeps me out when I picture it. It's definitely something that will always go unanswered, and even though I know it was obviously someone that knew me, it still creeps me out to this day. If that person wasn't being creepy and stalking me and was playing a joke or something, they would have come down to see me, or would have mentioned it by now, right? Sometimes I still wonder if whoever that was is stalking me when I go out there, seeing as how I never noticed the one time, what would stop them from doing it over and over? Ugh. I was living at a house in Texas with 5 other guys when this happened, and we all worked at the same shop. All 5 of them were at the shop and I'd come home early. Now, this is tough to describe, so bear with me. When you walked into the house, you essentially walked into the dining room. To the left is the family room, where I was. There's a doorway into it and the couch sits on the wall the doorway is on. So you walk in, turn to your immediate left, and the couch sits on that wall, facing a TV on the wall furthest from the doorway. Straight back from the dining room are 2 other rooms in the house, and there's a full bathroom right on your left as you exit the dining room. So there I am catching a nap before dinner when I hear the front door open. I'm half asleep, but I hear someone walk across the dining room floor and I can feel them standing right above my head. This was common. People would get home, say hi to whoever is in the family room, and maybe catch what's on TV for half a second. So although I'm awake, my eyes are still closed and I don't acknowledge whoever it is that's standing right above my head. The person then walks straight back, I hear the bathroom door open and the shower go on. I still don't get up. 20 minutes later the shower is still on, but I can hear it, so I know the bathroom door isn't closed. I go to the kitchen to get a drink, and glance at the bathroom as I do, only to see an enormous cloud of steam. I call out the kid's name, no answer. Again, louder, no answer. Walk into the bathroom, no one there, just the shower on as hot as it goes. I turn that off, walk through the house calling everyone's name, no one answers. I then go out into the driveway, no one's car is there. I call my buddy, and he tells me they're all still at the shop, none of them have left yet. Okay, whatever, maybe it's some joke they're playing on me. Went back in the house, grabbed the biggest knife I could and searched the house high and low, finding no one. I then asked other people at work if one of the guys in the house had left and came back, all of them said no. I still have no idea what it was, but it scared the shit out of me. So this was back in 2006 when I worked at a chain pretzel stand at my local mall. Now, this is during the dead afternoon days of the summer. Usually there would just be one person at the satellite store, which received much less traffic than the main stand. At this particular time, I'm that one person. The day was going by pretty slowly, and with no windows, time would often stand still. The cameras where the upstairs store could watch employees at all time made it pretty hard to text people and to have any distractions. Regardless, at some unknown time, a family of 3, mother, daughter, and young son stopped some distance from the counter and stare at me and the pretzels. I would not have thought it to be odd except for how they were dressed. They looked like they came straight out of the 1950s, like this. The son was much younger and was in 1950s style clothing as well. I'm thinking how weird this could possibly be, but then realized that right upstairs there was a Glamour Shots franchise, so they were probably dressed up for some photos. It was not until the little boy came up to the counter and asked for a pretzel. I told him the price, $2.66, and he handed me a $1 bill. I motioned to the mother that the pretzel cost $2.66 and he was $1.66 short. She looked at me like I told her the pretzel cost $10, because I understand that almost $3 for a pretzel is high, but she looked at me as if I wanted her to fork over her life savings. The little boy, not talking, hands me the dollar. I take a hard stare at it and realize it's a silver certificate, Series 1957. And this dollar bill did not look like it was 49 years old. It had normal wear and tear like a Series 2003 bill had the time. It wasn't crisp, but it was still very much usable and a bank would probably use it for further transactions. At this point I realized that nobody else really crossed their paths the entire time, and music store next door was pretty dead, even for a midsummer afternoon, while pedestrian traffic just seemed to not exist. I hand the dollar back to the boy, and he walks away with his mother and sister. I didn't see them afterward and nobody was witness to this account. I was hanging out with a half dozen people, of whom I only knew one, and I was awkwardly trying to mack it to her. It wasn't working. Anyways, we are out in the sticks just outside of a college town, and out of nowhere we just hear this blood-curdling scream outside the house. I mean, this was a scream of absolute terror. After a few minutes we started hearing more screaming and loud talking/whining from the woods behind the house. There was an old access road back there. I just went in there, and heard more whimpering but never really found where it was coming from. We called the police and the night was over. The next day I saw in the paper that a taxi driver from town took some poor college girl out to the woods at an undisclosed location and raped her and left her for dead, and the cops found her still alive but stabbed almost to death in the woods. I don't know if we called the cops to that specific situation or it was just a coincidence, but I wonder about it still. When I was 5 or so I was playing hide and seek with my older brother and sister. My brother was it. Well, they refused to go near our walk-in closet, let alone hide in it, so I decided to hide in there. The closet was about 4 feet deep, and 2 feet wide, and the floor was covered in clothes. We were messy, with a bar at the back full of coats. I wade through and sit in front of the coats, then start to scoot back so the coats hide me, but I bump into someone's knee. I assume it's my sister and shush her. I hear my brother calling out funny things to try and get me to laugh. A giggle pops out of my mouth and a hand touches my shoulder. Then I hear my brother yell out, "Come out, I got Beth." I didn't believe him. She was touching my shoulder still, until she yelled, "Yeah, he caught me, you can come out now." I freeze and the hand tightens on my shoulder and I can feel breathing on my neck. I bolt out of there and start bawling and tell them someone was in the closet with me. We all go to the closet, turn on the light, push back the coats, and we see an imprint of where someone was sitting in the clothes. We all stare at it for a second, then book it to the living room and don't play hide and seek inside again. In my college, we have railroad tracks that cut across the campus. One night when I was really drunk, I was walking back to the dorms from my friend's apartment on the railroad tracks. One section of the tracks cuts through a forest and it was really creepy. I saw a little shack in the woods, but I didn't think anything of it and kept stumbling along. After I walk a quarter mile down, I hear an old man say, "Hey." I look behind me and there is an extremely old man standing on the tracks where the house is, just staring at me. I stopped and stared back. Then the scariest thing ever happened and the man started running full speed in my direction. I was scared as hell because he was running way faster than a man that age can, so I ran as fast as I could down the tracks. After I ran another few hundred feet, I grew tired and looked behind me. The man was gone and there was nothing behind me anymore. I know I wasn't seeing things because I wasn't that drunk. I came to the conclusion that the man was just trying to scare me away from his shack, but a few weeks later I was walking down the same tracks when I looked and the shack was completely gone. I got a phone call from an unfamiliar number on my cell phone. I picked it up, and the man on the other end said, "Sorry, Wrong number before I had even said a word. The same number called me again a few days later, and this time when I answered, they just hung up. This was very curious, so I googled the number, and by a little sleuthing, I found out the number belonged to someone who lived in the same town as me, and had the same full name as me. When the number called a third time, they hung up again. This was the last time I got a call. I tried calling back and got no answer. So, I don't know what to make of it. The odds of the only other person in the city with the same name as me calling my unlisted number on accident 3 times seem pretty steep. But then again, I cannot think of another angle for why they bother looking me up by name and calling me, only to say nothing. Guess I will never know. On Christmas Eve one year, when I must have been about 7, I was lying in bed with excitement, with my sister in a bed next to me. About half an hour after we had gone to bed, I hear drumming on the roof. The attic didn't go over the bedroom, so above our heads was just roof. I also hear bells, again coming from above me. Faint laughing. While this noise goes on, I can hear my family talking and laughing downstairs. I turn to my sister, she's got a grin on her face, she heard everything too. I had been told that Father Christmas only comes into your room, we got presents in stockings at the foot of our bed, if you are asleep, so of course I shut my eyes. Fell asleep soon after, and the next day presents were there. Older cynical me thinks it was a trick by my dad, but I definitely heard him talking downstairs while this was happening. I remember the whole thing vividly, and my sister remembered it, so it wasn't a dream. Still confused to this day. Backstory: my dad developed heart problems that forced him into an early retirement. He was a lifelong smoker, but he quit as soon as he was diagnosed with his heart condition. About a year after the diagnosis, he passed away from a heart attack. I was away at college at the time, and I went home to stay in my old house with my mom and family the night he passed away. I stayed in my old room from high school, which had been completely cleared out since I had moved out. I went to bed that night in that empty room, with only a mattress on the floor and nothing else. The next morning I woke up to find an unopened pack of cigarettes lying on the floor in the middle of the room. I don't smoke. No one in my family smokes. Everyone in my family swears he quit, no one saw him smoke after the initial diagnosis. But even if he was secretly still smoking, that doesn't explain how the box of cigs ended up on my empty bedroom floor when nothing was there the night before. When I was a kid, we used to catch crayfish under a bridge in a creek near my house. Being shitty little kids, we thought it would be funny to catch a bunch of them, then throw them onto the road going over the bridge and stand by to watch cars run over them. Everything was going swimmingly until this beat-up old car slows down and stops in front of the bridge. A stoned, crazy-looking college kid got out and slowly started walking towards us. I was the oldest of the group and everyone else kind of cowered behind me. He stared at me, then looked at the crayfish, baking in the hot summer sun. In one swift motion he picked me up and dangled me over the edge of the bridge yelling, "How would you like it, huh?" I was in such shock over what was happening that all I could do was laugh nervously. I think I did this to prevent the other little kids from shitting themselves from terror, as they nervously laughed too. Eventually, he put me down, got back in his beater car and drove off with a far-off look in his eye. We never talked about what happened and didn't tell our parents. That was until recently when I brought it up with my brothers at a family gathering. We all remembered what had happened like it was the movie Sleepers or something and remarked on how bizarre it was, but none of us could come up with an explanation.